Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to my kitchen. My name is Rachel Weissman. I'm a healthy cooking teacher, personal chef, and part-time yoga instructor. And I am so excited to have you here today. We're gonna make some nut snacks to start, and then we're gonna dive into some really nice summer vegetable forward dishes. We make a tabbouleh style salad with kale and cherry tomatoes and quinoa, and a summer borscht soup, nice and light, served great served room temperature or warm. And we're gonna make some mint dressing that goes really nicely on summer fruits. Let's get started. All right, friends, we're gonna start with some nut snacks. I'm gonna make two different flavors so you can see how versatile this base concept is. I'm gonna start with some unsalted, fancy mixed nuts. And I am really bad, I apologize. I don't measure this. Usually I do have a written recipe and I will share that with you. So we're actually gonna start by putting a little bit of liquid in. I know it seems counterintuitive. Obviously at the end we want the nut snacks to be nice and dry, but I have a secret for that. So we're gonna put a little Frank's in there and about a really heaping teaspoon of blackening seasoning for this one. And then this is the secret sauce. Well, the secret to drying sauce. And it's arrowroot powder. And we're just gonna get a nice little, maybe a teaspoon of that in there. And that starch actually helps the liquid dry out but adhere to the outside of the nut. So we're gonna get our tiny little mini whisk, and I don't know if you can see in there, just mixing it up so that the arrowroot powder and the blackening seasoning get nicely incorporated into the hot sauce. And now dump that in and stir everything really well so you kind of get all of them evenly coated. It takes less than you think it will, so that it doesn't look like a lot in the bowl, but it really does the trick to get a nice even coating. All right, make sure you scrape all of it off the bottom. Lost a few along the way. I'll get that later. All right, we're gonna empty that out. I have a silicone baking mat lined cookie sheet. I'm just gonna kind of shake it, trying to get it into an even layer. Beautiful. And we're gonna go again. This time, we're going to do like a buffalo ranch on some cashews. If you're doing this, I really strongly recommend that you start with at least unsalted roasted. A little bit of extra time in the oven won't hurt them, but you're adding more seasoning, and a lot of these pre-mixed seasonings already have salt in them. So if you start with a salted nut, you're gonna end up with a really salty snack, and that might not be what you're looking for. So I'm using a little bit of buttermilk ranch seasoning mix. Again, we're gonna go, more than a teaspoon. It's not an exact science. We're gonna get another teaspoon of our arrowroot powder. All these guys out of the way in a second. Whisk it up. And now we're gonna go and dump some of our cashews in. Again, you want to keep going until they all look like they're thoroughly mixed. Sorry, thoroughly coated. Cashews are easy because they're a lighter color. You can really tell when they've got the seasoning on them. Beautiful. Now we're going to dump these out. Get them in a nice even layer. And then these are both going to go in the oven at 250 for about 20 minutes. Okay, friends, we have our nut snacks in the oven. We're gonna go ahead and start on the summer borscht soup to give that some time on the stove to simmer, get its flavors together. We've got a lot of vegetables to chop. But first, we're gonna get some water boiling because we're gonna start by skinning our tomatoes and our beets. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm setting up an ice bath so that when the vegetables come out of the boiling water, they go right into an ice bath really quickly. We're not trying to cook them through, just loosen the skins up so they come off more easily. All right, we'll let that water get to boiling, and in the meantime, go ahead and start chopping some of our other vegetables up. All right, so for this soup, we have vegetables going in at different points throughout. So we're gonna keep them separated as we chop them up so that they are easy to put in at the different stages. Let's go ahead and start with our onion. Take that outside papery skin off. All right, so got our onion. I'm gonna cut the top off. I have a nice flat edge there. I like to keep a bowl or bucket on deck to put all my scraps in while I'm cooking. It just makes it easier than constantly moving back and forth to the trash can. Also, if you compost, this is a nice way to kind of collect it all in one place and then just take it out to your compost pile. We're gonna take the roots of the onion off. Cut it in half. And then on each half, we're gonna come in and do some slices, keeping the root end intact. And that just helps us keep control while we come in, pinch it all together and get nice little dice. Take it, get a little more here. Being sure we use as much as possible as necessary, but also safety first, right? So don't get too close to your fingers with the knife if you can avoid it. We're gonna do the other side. This recipe calls for a whole small to medium onion. And actually, there's a benefit to cutting your onions and garlic first. The sulfur compounds that are in them that are good for your health, they actually sort of activate more after they've had a chance to set after you've cut them. So, some garlic. And I really like this soup with a lot of garlic in it. We're gonna try and pull about 4 good-sized cloves out of this. I like to do this over a little bowl so that all these papery skins that can be kind of a pain to deal with stay in one place, and then we can just dump them over here. All right, I've got 4 decent-sized cloves. I'm just gonna take the paper off of each one of them. Handy little trick. If you kind of squeeze the clove between your fingers and thumbs like this and twist a little bit back and forth, it helps release that papery skin, making it easier to peel off. You don't even need one of those fancy garlic peel tubes that they sell. I like to take the ends off of the garlic. Some people leave them on, especially in like a soup like this that you're gonna cook for a while. I don't know, just aesthetically feel better about it. Okay, so in this recipe, so that the garlic is a little more forward in flavor, we're actually gonna slice it, not just like mash it up and mince it. So your clove nice and steady, claw fingers rolled under, through. There's usually like one side of the garlic clove that's a little more stable than the other one. So roll it around a couple times till you find that. The more stable it is, the more of a flat edge you have to cut, the safer your cutting is. So we're gonna put the garlic in its own little bowl. Let's do the water isn't boiling yet. Let's do the zucchini next. All right, so I've already washed all of these vegetables, so don't panic if you don't see me washing them in the video. We're gonna take the ends off of the zucchinis. And like I was just saying, cutting is safest when you have a flat surface, and zucchinis are not flat. So the first thing we're gonna do is come through our tunnel hand and slice this bad boy in half the long way. Now we have a nice flat surface to cut from. We're gonna come through again with our claw hand. We're just gonna sort of drag our knife through a couple times so we get some nice stripes down it. All right, and now we're gonna be able to come through and get a nice dice. So with a soup like this, or any soup really, I think that we're not in a French five-star restaurant. If everything's slightly different size, we're okay. We're not trying to be perfect. But if everything is roughly the same size, all the different vegetables, it just makes it, you don't always think about this, but as an eating experience is actually a little more pleasant if everything fits nicely on the spoon together. Same thing over again. I remember when I was a kid one time, it must have probably a holiday, and we were with my mom's side of the family, and we were all helping to get the meal ready, and my uncle gave me so much hell about the fact that my chopping wasn't perfectly all the same size. So we decided at that point years ago that it was just a rustic approach. Like I said, I think from a cooking perspective, to get an even cook for the eating experience, it's important to get everything roughly the same size. But none of us are that fancy, and unless it's your uncle, anyone who comes over and complains that you didn't chop your food perfectly in the dish that you're feeding them, you should just kick them right out of your house because they don't deserve it. Other things to bear in mind when you're thinking about the sort of relative sizing of your vegetable pieces is the density of the vegetable. So the zucchini is actually going to cook pretty quickly, and we're actually going to add it towards the end for that reason. But the carrots, for example, are pretty dense. They're going to take a little longer to cook. That's why we're A, going to add them in sooner, but B, that's why we're going to cut them up just a little bit smaller than we did the zucchini. We're going to peel the carrots. When they're like tiny baby fresh spring carrots, I don't feel like you have to peel them. You can just give them a good wash. These carrots are actually, they don't look that nice, but they are some of the sweetest, most delicious carrots. But you do want to peel these because they've got a slightly thicker skin. All right, we're gonna top and tail them. Because carrots are a little firmer, the knife can get a little wonkier, so I like to cut them in half the long way first. Better. It just makes it a little bit easier to control while we're working with it, but then like with the zucchini, We're gonna come in and cut it so we have a nice flat side to work with. So you can see, like I was saying, sort of relative to similar kind of shape and size, just a little smaller because it is a denser vegetable. The other reason I like to cut the carrots in half the long way like that is that sometimes, you know, carrots classically sort of taper. They get skinnier towards the bottom, so that way you have a more sort of portional set of cuts. The tops, if they're thicker, you can get 4 cuts in, the bottoms maybe 3. Just makes it a little easier. Okay, so skin peeling trick. We're not going to do it so much on the beets, but for the tomatoes, this also works really well with like peaches or nectarines. If you're going to do some baking, you're going to score a little X. And that's just because the skin will actually pop from there instead of all over the sides. And we're going to go ahead and throw our beets in to the boiling water. And then we're going to add our tomatoes. We're going to give it like 2 minutes. Okay, so those are going. Let's get our radishes going.
Your nut timer is done.
But first, nut snacks are done. I know, I promise my hands are clean. You just want to kind of give 1 or 2 of them a good feel, make sure they feel dry. If they are good and done, just set that on top. And we're going to let those cool for a little bit. And then we'll have a little sort of snack while we're making the rest of our food. Okay, radishes. Radishes, because they're just awkward. They're little and round, and there's really not much you can do about it. So we're just going to do our best to get them around the same size as the carrots. Radishes, I feel like they often get forgotten when it comes to cooking vegetables. They tend to sort of get stuck on the side of veggie platters and no one wants them, maybe one person. But the flavor actually mellows when they get cooked, so they don't have that same sort of pungent bite. So if that's why you've been avoiding them, I encourage you to try them cooked because they are actually very delicious and very good for you. So you'll see similar kind of theme. I'm always trying to find... Alexa, stop the timer. All right, so duty calls. We're gonna stop with the radishes and we're gonna come over here and I'm gonna take the tomatoes out first. I'm just gonna quickly dump it into my ice cold water over here, and that's gonna stop the cooking process and cool it down enough that my poor little fingers can touch the tomatoes. We're gonna let the beets go just a little bit longer so that skin can loosen. You can see now where we cut that X, the skin has sort of cracked further, and it's really this easy. The skin just peels back now. Now, I don't always bother doing this for everything, but in this recipe, it's kind of just nice texturally to not have those chewy extra bits of skin floating around the soup. So we take the time to do this. And that's how you peel a tomato, friends. Like I said, the same thing works with like with peaches and stone fruits. If you're baking, you also don't want the skin in your pie or cobbler. If you want to get in on this one, maybe, because we're actually going to take the seeds out of the tomatoes too. We've cut our first tomato in half. Cut it in quarters again, it's pretty big. And you just kind of get your thumb in there and sort of pull the goopy seeds out. It always reminds me of like at Halloween, they do those things where they like put something behind you, like stick your hand in the hole and it's like spaghetti, but they're like, it's worms. It's a strange sensation for sure. Okay. Yeah. You'll find like a lot of like tomato sauce recipes call for these steps. Sometimes I just don't feel we just use the whole tomato, skin and all. Um, from a classical cooking perspective, right? There's certain ways, and that also is often about like the final texture and the results like that. I also like to just try not to waste any unnecessary part most of the time. So usually when like during the week when we're doing something like that, we just kind of go whole tomato. And friends, if you're following along at home, it is really important to be very careful with your knife at this point because it is slippery. I have definitely cut myself at like from this point forward because I wasn't being careful. Okay, so we're just gonna take that stem section out of any of them from the top. It's just not good eating. All right, and now this is like really just like a coarse chop kind of situation, so. I know this is like a lot of chopping for one recipe, but I promise it's worth it in the end. And then the good news is afterwards, just kind of let it do its thing on the stove. I'm gonna give this a rinse. It got kind of gooey. Just have towels everywhere is one of my recommendations for cooking. Just have towels everywhere around your kitchen. I've got one on me, I've got two floating around, and sometimes I still can't find one. All right, so our beets are final chop for this recipe, besides our herbs. So it's gonna get messy again. If you're worried about your fingers being stained purple, I invite you to put on some gloves at this point. Come in, we're gonna take the top off where that meet us, and I didn't really let this go. So I'm actually gonna just get the peeler in, but it does come off a lot more easily for having been in the water. In the winter, oftentimes, if I'm planning to work with beets, I'll actually just throw them in the oven for like 30 minutes and let them kind of start roasting. It just makes the skin so much easier to get off. But the name of the game with summer cooking is beat the heat. So the less we can have the stove going and the oven on, the better. And we're doing just fine. And you can see, friends, purple fingers. Okay, last one. Flat side down, we're gonna cut it in half. I'm gonna cut it again. Yeah. I feel like traditionally borscht is like beets, maybe some cabbage. It's not quite as many vegetables as we have here, but the summer is just, there's so many beautiful vegetables in season, and it's just more delicious with more stuff in it. I also just realized, guys, there's one more vegetable I forgot to introduce you to for this recipe. And this is some... The recipe's pretty versatile. It can use cabbage or kale, but I saw this beautiful purple kale at the farmer's market this morning, and I thought, well, the soup's already gonna be purple. So I've already cleaned most of this, but I always like to demonstrate how easy it is to get kale prepped. So I left a couple sort of on the stem for you. And really what you're gonna do is you're just gonna pinch at the base of the stalk and then peel it up like that. Get rid of the stalk one more time. Take the little leaves at the bottom off, pinch the stem at the end, and just sort of pull. There you go. Look at that. Now, we really don't even have to chop this. We can just kind of rip it into nice bite-sized pieces. And you can do this like this whether you're making a salad, kale chips, sauteing it, roasting it. That prep style works really nicely for a lot of different formats. Okay, so because this is going in soup, we're not too worried about it still having a little sort of water clinging to it from being washed. When we get to the salad later, I washed it, but then also put it through the salad spinner to get the extra liquid off so it doesn't water down our delicious dressing. Also, if you are going to prep a bunch of kale on the weekend so that it's nice and easy to make during the week without having to go through the whole shebang, you do want to make sure at that point that you are getting as much of the water off of it as possible. It'll just help it store for longer, better for longer. Again, we're just ripping it into bite-sized pieces. Okay, friends, we are coming over to the stove finally. We're gonna get our summer borscht cooking. And get the pot nice and warm first. Put a little drizzle of some olive oil in there. We're gonna let that oil heat up a little bit. When it's good and warm, it'll have kind of like a little bit of like a shimmery shine to the top of it. That's what I'm in here looking for. We're going to start with our onions. Them nice and coated in the oil. And we're looking for these to just start softening and getting a little translucent. So there's sort of two schools of thought when it comes to making soup. You can absolutely, if you're like, oh my gosh, I've been chopping for days, I just want the soup to be done, you could dump it all in at the same time. It would be a good soup. But I believe that building the flavor up yields an excellent soup. So we are gonna take the time and cook some stuff in stages and then give everything a few minutes at the end to sort of meld together. All right, so I'm trying to find, I don't know if you can see in here clearly, like this piece right here, that's getting there. It's not quite translucent. This is probably close enough for us to go ahead and start adding in the next. I'm gonna put a pinch of salt in at this point so that these veggies can start to soak it up a little bit. We're gonna let these go for about 5 minutes to start softening. Oh, forgot to throw at this point. Garlic at this point. I might have needed a bigger pot. We can always skimp on the kale if we need to. I know it's gonna make everyone really sad. Okay, friends, so this stuff's getting a little soft. We're gonna go ahead and layer in the next round of ingredients, which is going to be some of our kale. I think we're gonna go a little lighter on it right now. We might be able to add some back in later after some of this is cooked down. That's the really nice thing about these sort of like heartier greens. They can hold a lot of cooking. So they work really nicely in soups. We're gonna put like 1 tablespoon of our chopped dill in at this point. The beauty of fresh dill is letting it kind of sing fresh at the end. So most of it's gonna come in towards the end of our recipe. We're gonna do another little mini baby pinch of salt. And now we're going to add our cooking liquid. So I'm using chicken stock today. You can do this with vegetable stock. And even honestly, there's so much flavor already coming out from all the vegetables. You could totally just do this with some water as well. You have options. Okay. So. And you can maybe even see over here that actually that quart of stock was not quite enough liquid. So I'm gonna go ahead. Add a little more water. Now, as these vegetables cook, they're gonna sort of release some of the liquids in them as well. But I don't think that soup can be too soupy, so it's okay. And we can always cook some of the liquid off at the end if it feels too thin. All right, we're gonna cover this and let it go for about 5-10 minutes and come back and add the rest of our vegetables. All right, friends, our soup is simmering. We've got a few last minute vegetables to add in a little bit, but we're gonna go ahead and scoot back over to the cutting board and start our salad. So the first thing that we're actually gonna do is get our greens ready. So I mentioned before, with this kale, and this is a different kind of kale, it's called lacinato Tuscan or dinosaur kale. And it's just a little less fibrous and bitter, which makes it optimal for a kale salad option. So if you're gonna eat it raw, I tend to like to go with lacinato kale for that purpose. And like I mentioned earlier, because we're doing a salad out of this, we did wanna make sure that we got our leaves nice and dry. You see here, I am lining up strips. So the stems have already been removed, and I'm just kind of shaping them along in the same direction. So what we're gonna come in with, now we've got a good stack here. Come back in with our knife and just start kind of getting some little slices. It can be a little tricky to keep fingers safe when you've got, I probably made my stack of leaves a little too big. Just try and remember to keep your fingers curled under and your thumb tucked in. Ta-da! It smells so green when it's been cut. It's gonna mellow out. So this recipe is inspired by a tabbouleh salad, but it is a little bit heartier than tabbouleh is, using the kale instead of relying solely on parsley for the greens. It's also gluten-free in that we're using quinoa instead of the traditional cracked bulgur wheat. If you love that and you have some on deck, you can absolutely use that as well. We're not going to use all of this kale again too. So this salad though is nice. This will actually hold up for at least a couple of days once it's fully prepped. Oftentimes salads don't really last very long after you put the dressing on. But that's one of the nice things about using kale as your salad green, because again, it's heartier. It actually will, the dressing kind of softens it, but doesn't get it like mushy like a lettuce leaf would be if you ever like had a salad at a restaurant and been like, yeah, I'll totally take that home and eat the rest of it at home. And then you get home and like 3 hours later, it's all just like mushy sogginess. That's not good. But this is not like that. It actually is best if you let it rest for at least 30 minutes, if not overnight, before serving it. It really gives the acid in the dressing a chance to help kind of break some of the fibrous kale leaf down, make it nice and tender, and really let it soak up that flavor. So we're gonna stop here for right now, actually. So I've got my greens ready. I'm gonna make the dressing because we're gonna dress it with about half the dressing first and let the kale start to soften. So I'm gonna come over to my mint. I'm gonna pick a handful of leaves off. Salad mint? There were like, I'm not even kidding. There were probably 10 different types of mint at this farm stand. And I was feeling a little overwhelmed actually. But I was like, okay, what I'm making a salad. I'm going to make my dressing. So I went with the woman at the stand said that this was more of like your classic mint. So, cause some of them are a little sweeter. Some of them actually have hints of other flavors. So you'll see there's one that's like called like chocolate mint. Now, obviously chocolate is a totally different plant, but it manages to actually have a little bit of like a chocolatey sort of scent and flavor, similar with like orange mint or pineapple mint. I wasn't trying to go in that direction. The dressing, actually the mint dressing recipe that I have would work really nicely with a sweeter mint, but because we're kind of multi-purposing this mint into a few different recipes, this felt like the right kind. It's pretty amazing because, you know, like if you grew up like I did, mostly just like shopping at a regular grocery store, no idea that there's 50 kinds of mint, right? So we're gonna kind of pinch a nice little stack of leaves together and sort of like cigar roll them up a little bit. And this is called a chiffonade cut, or it would be if I were doing it really properly. So when you see a recipe and it calls for a chiffonade, what you're looking for is these really thin little strips. It's often a term applied to herbs. So you see it's kind of like confetti now. So, oh, it smells, can you smell that? It smells so good. Okay, so I'm actually gonna put this in my jar and we're gonna build the dressing around the mint and let the sort of the volatile essential oils in the mint, that's what gives that smell, really sort of blend into the dressing. Okay, we're gonna pause here because we gotta dump the rest of our veggies into our soup. It's gonna be tight. So tight. I don't know if we're gonna fit the tomatoes in. You know what? We're gonna not force it right now. We're gonna let that. This might call for a pot transfer. You guys, sometimes kitchen mishaps happen. Just gotta roll with the punches. Turn it back on. And like it's like it never happened. Throw those tomatoes in. Okay, at this point we're gonna give it a nice healthy pinch of salt. Crack a little pepper in there. And add the last of our dill. Switching recipes. Okay, so we've got our kale, we've got our mint, and we're gonna do lemon juice and olive oil. Two tablespoons of lemon juice. And no, friends, I didn't squeeze my own lemons. We can't all be perfect, right? So I did, however, get some, so I don't normally cook with extra virgin olive oil. It's kind of a waste. But we do have some for things like dressings. You get a little more of the fruitiness of the olive flavor in it. So things like this, like a dressing, a drizzle, that's where you're gonna use your nicer, fruitier, more robust flavored olive oils. We've got 3 tablespoons of that going in here. And then we'll be fancy. We'll use a little Maldon salt, put a little pinch of that in here. Crunch it up a little. Okay, and shake. All right, so I'm gonna put about half the dressing in and just another little tiny baby sprinkle of salt. It's just gonna help break the kale down a little more. And it's time to get our hands dirty again. So we're gonna massage the kale. And that's just really what we're doing, is we're working the dressing into the greens, really making sure that it's coating all of them so we get maximum flavor, but also the acid in the dressing, like I said, and the salt, they're gonna help start breaking down the cell walls and make the kale a little more tender and delicious for eating, a little less bitter by the time we get around to eating it. Okay, so we're gonna come in quickly and we're gonna get some sliced scallions. This time we're actually looking for the bulb. So you'll notice these aren't looking so hot up top. That's okay. They were actually, ugly vegetables need homes too. So these were actually discounted at the farm stand because the tops were not looking so pretty. But we knew we only needed this part, so it wasn't that big of a deal. They are actually still a little sandy though, so once we get all this dried papery stuff off, just give them a little rinse. Okay, we're gonna take these root ends off. Fancy trick, I learned this about maybe a year ago now. If you buy scallions, like little onions like this, and they still have the roots on, you can actually take most of the onion off, and then you can bury it with the roots back into the dirt, and it will keep growing up, and you'll only get the greens at that point, but it's pretty nifty. And actually we have like a handful of them going like that in the garden right now. So for today, because these are looking kind of sad, normally I'd save these and use them for a different purpose later, but those are looking a little on the sad side. So we'll just, so I'm going to cut down the length of this so we get kind of like half moon shapes. Onions can be literally slippery, so do be careful. You can think you've got your nice flat edge for cutting, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, it slips out of your hand, and you cut yourself. So we're just gonna go ahead and throw those sliced scallions right in. Again, coming down longwise. At this point, we're gonna go ahead and add in our kale. I had it already cooked, and it's a little warm, but that's okay because that residual heat's also just gonna help soften that kale a little bit. And the cherry tomatoes. So the thing that's lovely about this salad is actually you can get a really nice range of seasons out of it. In the spring, before tomatoes are in season, it actually works really well with strawberries. But because we're a little past strawberry season and it's prime cherry tomato season, I selected an assortment of different varieties of cherry tomatoes here. And we are going to probably quarter most of them, but I just really wanted to share this fancy trick that I learned watching an episode of Queer Eye. So full credit where credit is due. I did not come up with this, but you're gonna put your tomatoes in like one of these like deli containers in the lid, fill it up pretty nicely, put another one upside down on it, and then hold that in place and take your knife and you can put a little pressure in there. Oh, that knife doesn't want to do it. Slice right through. You have halves. But for the purposes of this salad, we're actually going to go ahead and cut each of those halves one more time. If you were hoping to like make this on the weekend and have it all throughout the week, I would actually recommend that you stop before you put the tomatoes in, mix everything up with some dressing, and then just add the tomatoes in each day or before you eat each portion of it, because the tomatoes are the thing that ultimately end up not holding as long. Otherwise, the greens and the quinoa, you could actually probably get almost a full week out of in your fridge, even with the dressing already on them. Like we talked about with mint, there's so many different kinds of tomatoes you can see. They're all ripe, but there's some that have green, like zebra stripes in them. There's like your more traditional red ones, some yellowy green ones. One more time. Ooh, I can hear that soup. I might want to turn it down a little bit. Yeah, and actually, it looks to be almost done. Just gonna put it on low while we finish up our salad, and then we'll give it a little taste. See if it needs any more seasoning. So we've got everything in our bowl. I'm gonna come back in with a little more dressing. Just, why not? All in, right? And at this point, we'll be fancy and we'll use some actual salad forks. And now we're just looking to kind of mix it all thoroughly. Get a nice even mix of that quinoa, scallion, and tomato throughout the greens. Yes. So beautiful. All right. Done. Set that off to the side, let it sit for a few minutes. And let's taste the soup. Home stretch. Oh, that is like right on the money. And actually, sometimes I like to finish it with a little bit of apple cider vinegar, but I think that the tomatoes we had in here today actually brought enough acid that we don't need to add anymore. And there you have it, friends. You've got some beautiful summer borscht. This would be really delicious, served more traditionally with a scoop of sour cream, or like some plain Greek yogurt. Would be really delicious in it too. Just kind of add a little creaminess and sort of heighten that tang. Yeah, and there we have it. We've got our nut snacks. We've made our salad, and we've got our soup all ready to go. It's time to enjoy.